Chapter 23. The Artificial Life. Lord Acton, in his Lectures on the French Revolution, 1910, called attention to the fact that Montesquieu, Voltaire, Turgot, Rousseau, and Diderot were all called, quote, liberal, end quote. But, quote, the only thing common to them all is the disregard for liberty, end quote. Too often it takes only an anti-Christian position to qualify as a liberal. France sought liberty and equality, two ideas that are in contradiction. To equalize men is to limit their freedom. The English system founded liberty on inequality. That is, liberty could and does mean inequality. But since the French Revolution, an increasing number of political movements have so stressed equality that liberty has been imperiled. It was no accident that French, quote, liberals, end quote, cited by Lord Acton had, despite very diverse political views, one thing in common: a separation from or a disdain for orthodox historic Christianity. They had, quote, emancipated, end quote, minds. They were genteel members of the Enlightenment tradition. The Marquis de Sade was a part of the same tradition, but he rebelled against maintaining the forms and declared open war on Christianity and its moral law. In fact, he declared war on all law in any form, saying, quote, what should we, who have no religion, to do with laws? End quote. Sade did not deny the existence of God. He simply denied to God any jurisdiction over the natural realm. Hence, there could be no Christianity, no biblical law, no law of any kind, only a total freedom for every desire or impulse. For Sade, quote, religion is incompatible with the libertarian system, end quote. There could be no restraints on human freedom. This Sadean doctrine has been advanced steadily since World War II with the legalization of abortion and homosexuality and the increasing assault on laws governing morality. The death penalty is under attack. Slander and libel laws are virtually dead. Euthanasia is quietly and sometimes publicly practiced, and so on and on. The radical and anarchic views of liberty which are increasingly advocated have as their premise the Sadean belief that it is criminal to resist nature. The Christian goal is supernatural man, the new man in Jesus Christ, whereas the humanistic perspective exalts natural man. What was once a criminal perspective is now a social and educational goal. This is an astonishing reversal of social policy for lawless activities now to have legal status and protection. Such a trend, if not reversed, will lead to the criminalization of Christianity and its laws. World War II saw a dramatic change in the conduct of warfare in many ways, but certainly a major one was the use by wartime leaders of radio to influence the home front. Hitler, Churchill, and Roosevelt used radio consistently to influence people, and with the Vietnam War, Americans were able to see American soldiers dying in battle. In the place of serious reflection, politics and war are now influenced by emotional reactions. Given the lack of serious religiously premised thinking, the emotional impact of modern television has been very important in eroding the reflective nature required for sound conclusions. In the early years of television, the most successful show was Dragnet, about two police detectives. There were no wild car chases, no shootings, nothing but quiet detective work. What has happened since is the replacement of such an approach with rapid action sensations. Having culturally replaced Christianity with naturalism, men have also replaced thought with sensations. Dr. Cornelius Van Til spoke of the direction of such thinking. If man is explained or seen primarily in terms of his unconscious or subconscious, we explain man then in terms of the child, his primitive past, animals, and so on, so that what we have is integration into the void. This is the direction of society now, downward towards the void. One of the casualties is sound thinking. In the name of naturalism, Sade practiced an anti-naturalism. Nature is marked by fertility, but Sade was anti-fertility, so his advocacy of things natural was governed by his hatred of God's purposes in creation. British radio and television presenter David Starkey, as a homosexual, advocated the artificial life, not the natural one. Nature, after all, while fallen, still reflects and is governed by God's sovereign will. It reflects God's order. Our Lord said, "Do men gather grapes with thorns or figs with thistles?" Matthew 7:16. Now, in Edna St. Vincent Millay, a superior American poetess of the 20th century, a remarkable and sad development took place. In her very early poem, Renaissance, she identified God and nature and was clearly a nature worshipper. Before long, however, as she embraced dissipation and sexual immorality, she parted company with nature. In A Few Figs from Thistles, 1922, Millay directly attacked Christianity and Jesus Christ. In her first fig, she celebrated burning the candle on both ends. In her second fig, she expressed scorn for the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount, describing what was built upon the solid rock as the ugly house, while her shining palace was built upon the sand. In The Harp Weaver and Other Poems, 1920, she expressed scorn in the bulk of people as, quote, "the fat of heart," end quote, in, quote, "my heart being hungry," end quote. In 2nd April 1921, in speaking of death, her conclusion is, "Life must go on. I just forget why." Her goal in Sonnet 7 is to, quote, "become accustomed to the dark," end quote. In Sonnet 9 she said, quote, "I am the booth where folly holds her fair," end quote. In Huntsman, What Quarry, 1933, her growing love of death is much in evidence. How can anyone endure life with its, quote, "packed men and their hot rivalries," end quote, quote, "having smelt this grace, how cool it is," end quote. In Wine from These Grapes, also in collected sonnets and collected poems, Millay had a series of sonnets entitled, quote, "Epitaph for the Race of Man," end quote. Quote, "Renaissance," end quote, had become death instead. Earth for her was an, quote, "unhappy planet born to die," end quote. The, quote, "race of Adam," end quote, she wrote, would find, quote, "anonymous death," end quote, and, quote, "without a mind to monstrous nothing yield your little breath," end quote. Man's achievement will be destruction. Millay became one of a number of humanistic poets proclaiming a last judgment more ugly than ever preached by revivalists of old. Her humanism led her to despise man, as witness, "My heart being hungry." In The Buck in the Snow, the body is spoken of with irritation. In Moriturus as, quote, "as best a bundle of aches," end quote. What we see in Millay is that the pose of a happy sinner, innocent in sin, does not produce a lusty sinner, but rather a sick and sour one. In the 1920 census, it became apparent that the United States had changed from a rural to an urban nation. Some held that through the 1930s, most Americans were still being born in rural areas or towns under 5,000 in population, so that a rural-oriented culture still prevailed. In the 1920s and 1930s, this new New York-centered culture was celebrated in Vanity Fair, which exalted the theatrical, the ephemeral, and the superficial. This ephemeral culture soon led openly to the homosexual ethos openly celebrated. As far as the governing urban culture and that of the media was concerned, it was triumphant in its emphasis on the anti-moral and the artificial. Morality was declared to be alien to life, a religious imposition that should be discarded. The artificial life was thus radically anti-Christian as well as more or less anti-natural. The artificial life was an attempt to celebrate existence as against the fact of death, a natural occurrence. The culture, quote, at the top in the 20th century has been this anti-Christian culture of the artificial, a culture of death. When I was young, poetry was still a major part of everyone's schooling because it expressed the hope and faith of the people. Since World War II, poetry reaches a very small minority, and without direct or indirect subsidies, we would see almost no poets. Thus, Brooks Haxton in Dominion, 1986, held that, quote, left to our own devices, none of us needs to believe in hell. No one need believe, end quote. In, quote, leaving the drugstore, for example, end quote. The author may not believe in hell, but his poems showed him living in it. Ben Ramke in The Difference Between Night and Day, 1778, like Miroslav Holub, finds the greatest emptiness in man. Edward Hirsch, in For the Sleepwalkers, 1981, reeks with contempt for the common man with his normal life. William Meredith, in The Cheer, 1980, wrote, quote, the love of living disturbs me, end quote, and he calls upon Freud to cure him, end quote, dying away, end quote. The artificial life is all around, trying, in spite of our Lord's words, to pick figs from thistles and grapes from thorns. Of all such men, the words of Proverbs 8:36 still apply, quote, but he that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death. The artificial life begins with the hatred of God. Because it despises God's order, it seeks a radical leveling or equality. Because it hates men, it hates the equality it champions in order to choose death instead. Its goal is universal suicide.